ruled by their biological conditioning, their behavior, the way they walk, what they eat, and so on. All of it is dictated by their physical structure. And it is this conditioning which we come to call their nature. We would say that it is lion's nature to kill. We would say that it is the sloth's nature to be lazy, and so on. It is this conditioning that defines the nature of any animal. With the human being also, the physical conditioning of the human being more or less decides its nature, who he is. And whenever we say that it is human nature to be this way or to be that way, to be happy, to seek for comfort, to be greedy, to be hateful, we attach a certain finality to it. There is a certain conclusiveness about this human nature that man possesses. Is the human being condemned to its nature just as the animal would not go beyond its conditioning, beyond its nature? Is the human being also limited to its nature, to its conditioning? If that's the case, then there is no freedom there. There is no free will that the human being can exercise. He will always be under the boundaries. He will always function within the parameters of its own conditioning. And so, is that it? Is that all for the human being? Can he not go beyond its own conditioning, beyond its own nature? Is he simply limited to function within those same characteristics that is defined by its physical conditioning? If that is the case, then everything that the human being will do would be deterministic, would be according to only a pattern. There wouldn't be any freedom involved there. There wouldn't be any sense of creativity there, because creativity, creation comes with freedom. And if there is no freedom, all of it is simply mechanical, is simply programmed based. And is human being supposed to run with the program it is built upon, or there is a way, there is a path, something that human being can do so as to go beyond its own program, go beyond its own conditioning? It seems that no animal can do that, and it is simply bounded by its physical structure, by its biological conditioning. But if that is also the case with human being, we wouldn't see the human restless, we wouldn't see the human being discontented, we wouldn't see the human being urging himself, trying to go beyond the boundaries that it is confined in, whether they are physical boundaries or whether they are the boundaries of the conditioning of the society, of the culture he lives in, or the conditioning of its own body, of its own experiences. So it seems that the discontentment within, the restlessness, the feeling of inadequacy. When the human being feels insufficient, it is through this feeling, through this discontent within, that he can go beyond its conditioning, because there is no discontentment with the animal. The animal, if it is being fed, if it has its shelter, it mates, then it is contented. It does not want to do anything beyond this. But that's not the case with the human being. Human being wants to go beyond just its own basic needs, its own physical needs. The needs being food, shelter, and clothing. Human being is just not simply satisfied, contented with being his physical needs met. He wants to venture out and see what lies beyond just the physical comfort. He is simply not satisfied with physical contentment. And it is this dissatisfaction which leads the human being to pursue comfort, comfort of the mind, psychological comfort. And in order to lay his hand on this psychological comfort, an ease within, certain rest within, he tries number of things. The design of the human mind is such that it looks out for comfort, that it wants security. It will have its physical security, it will have its comfort of the physical nature, but he also wants the comfort of the mind, a psychological ease within. And it is for this comfort he strives, he struggles, he works. And we see how there are then innumerable ways, methods through which the human being seeks a sense of psychological comfort. This psychological comfort can be accessed through beliefs, through telling oneself a story, having a notion, an idea, and it is these psychological things that comfort him. He simply limits himself to his own belief, to his own ideas, to his own notions, to his own cultural conditioning, which gives him a sense of security. And it is when this security appears to be in jeopardy, he acts, he becomes violent. And so the need of the human being beyond its physical comfort is of a psychological comfort. And when he simply is too eager, is too impatient to come to that which would really provide him comfort, to understand where does his insecurity comes from, to understand, find out where does his demand, this urge to seek rest comes from, he will simply abide in the notions, the beliefs that is available to him. He would not try to venture out, look, understand, question, inquire that what is it which would give him that limitless freedom, that security which cannot be, which does not depend on anyone, which does not depend on a culture, a person, a belief, an ideology. And if he simply functions within the parameters, within the boundaries of its own nature, and is contented with it and is at ease with it, we will find that he will restrict himself within a pattern, that he would live a life in a certain groove, in repetition. And it is this groove, this pattern, this repetition which would become his life. It would not want to break out of this pattern, break out of this groove, these habits that it has formed, which comforts him. He will call the travails, the turmoils, the suffering that comes with limiting oneself to a pattern, to certain habits, a way of life. He would come to identify his own limited life as life itself. He would say that life is simply sadness, suffering, a little bit of pain, happiness, joy, and death. He would really not come upon, discover for himself that what is the truth of life, what is the point of existence, who in fact he is. He would just settle himself into certain conclusions. He would have fixed notions about life, and it is these conclusions, these fixed notions, that would not allow him to come to anything substantial, anything that is concrete. If in his life he is greedy, if in his life he is hateful, he has animosity, he would say that this is simply a human nature and I am functioning well beyond, well within it. I cannot help it. It's just how the human is. Without really inquiring how does greed come about, without really finding for oneself why do the human being hates, he simply would ascribe his hate, his jealousy, his greed, his suffering as human nature, as part of a human life. And so it becomes our responsibility to really find out the truth about what is the human nature, and not simply accept, not be lazy, and just be contented with our default condition of anxiety, of problems, of worrying, of animosity, and so on. If we simply shut ourselves from finding out anything substantial, we would limit ourselves into this forever going struggle of the human being. Generations upon generations, the human would simply repeat the same ordeal, would repeat the same patterns, would live in those same habits, would be insecure, would be fearful, would be greedy, and in its pursuits he will destroy everything that is around. He would destroy the nature, he would destroy another human being, he would destroy someone who is not from his own group, his own country, his own religion. The human being would continue to repeat the pattern in which all humankind has continued and is continuing. There will be no change, there would be no transformation in the human behavior, in the consciousness itself. One has to search and understand why we are hateful, why do we suffer. One cannot just simply accept suffering as the reality of life. It may be our present condition, but it does not have to be our conclusive state. It does not have to become the story of our life. That human being is born to suffer and he will continue to suffer until the day he dies. It doesn't have to be that way. We can find what real joy is. One can understand, discover for oneself what is happiness. One doesn't have to fight the other for resources, for opportunities. One doesn't really have to be insecure. One can see and look. Why does one behave in a greedy way? Why is one confused? Why is one a slave to his own desires? Why does one constantly desire? And even after pursuing all his desires, he is still the way he was when he started, dissatisfied, unhappy, restless within. The human nature as it exists doesn't have to be that way. The human is not a machine that it has to live according to its own conditioning. It can see and find out for oneself that whether it can go beyond, whether he can go beyond his own conditioning, his own inward programming. He can watch, he can see how his conditioning plays out in his daily lives, in his daily life, in everyday existence. How from an hour to hour, from moment to moment, how everything that he does is simply a result of his past, comes from his own experiences, is a product of his own memory, a modified one, but more or less the same. The human being can see that how he is simply stuck in a repetition, that he has a pattern of pleasure and pain, that he yearns for pleasure, and when the pain is insufferable, he goes towards something that would release that pain, and that becomes his pleasure, and this cycle continues. He can see the reality of that cycle. He is not condemned to follow it, to subscribe to it, to be its slave. Human being can understand his physical desires. It is not that he is simply programmed to run after sexual gratification. He can understand what takes place, how his senses works, how the imagery in the mind simply dictates his outward actions, and these imageries are a result of a past. It comes from his own past experiences. He can see that how everything repeats itself over and over again. Nothing new really happens with him, and it is this repetition, the chemical pleasure that he receives through this repetition, that he is addicted to it. He can see that he is divided within, and he separates himself from the other, and it is through this separation that there is hate, that there is animosity, that one thinks that by destroying the other, by dominating the other, by ruling the other, by possessing the other, he will be secure, he would be powerful, he would be someone. He can see this division within him, that the idea of a separate existence, the idea of an individual existing separately from its environment, from others, is a false idea. That which is within him is in the other also. It is not different. The separation is only bodily. What works within the other, the insecurity, the hate, the jealousy, the desire to be comfortable, it is the same machinery that is running within him too. And so he and the other is not different, are not different. They are same. He can see why he is greedy, and that it doesn't have to be a thing of human nature, that it is not something that he is bound to do. He is greedy, he accumulates, he wants possessions because that possession makes him alive. He feels powerful. It gives him a sense of importance. And it is this hunger for power, it is this hunger for importance that makes him greedy. He is not really behind money. What he is behind is making himself feel a certain way. The outward riches, the possessions, the accumulation is simply a way to fill the emptiness that is within. Being poor within, he seeks the material riches outwardly. The struggle for possession, the hunger for power is simply a compensation of the inner inadequacy that he carries within. His demand for pleasure comes from his own suffering. He is stuck in the cycle of pleasure and pain. And he can see that for himself. He doesn't have to repeat the same thing again and again. It is the human only who can go beyond its nature. He can look, he can observe and free himself from his tendencies, from what he thinks he has to do. There is nothing really he has to do. He doesn't have to suffer. He doesn't have to be greedy. He doesn't have to be hateful. He doesn't have to be stuck in the cycle of pleasure and pain. He can free himself. And if the human being is not free, he is simply a machine which is running on a program, just like a computer. He would simply store, he would simply have a memory, a experience upon which he would function. He would simply have a lot of past data as his input, and what he produces as output would be the modified version of his own data that he collected through experiences, through memories. The way he will behave, the way he will conduct himself, his whole life, his identities would simply be a function of his own past and nothing else. There would be nothing that is alive within him. He would just simply be a machinery. He would become mechanical in his nature. He will simply react to the stimuli that is in the environment. There would be no comprehension. There would be no understanding. There would be no seeing. He would simply react to the environment outside, to what it is exposed to. There would be no thoughtfulness within him. There would be no care, there would be no consideration, there would be no love. Machines don't love, it's the free human being who loves. And he cannot be free until he pays attention to his very mechanical nature. Without attention, without freedom, there can be no love within him. In the name of love, he would only have attractions, desires, and attachments, and nothing else. The human nature needs to be challenged. One cannot simply take it as one's destiny, as something that one has to abide to. Human nature is not an obligation. It is a conditioning that we have to free ourselves from. We are not condemned to the nature of the human as we see it in its present form, with all its tendencies, patterns, and habits. When we pay attention to our daily life, to how we talk to the other, how we behave, how we think, how we react, why do we hate some things, why do we care for some things, what is it that we are attracted to, what is it that we resist, what are our own beliefs on which we operate, and do we have to have those beliefs? Yes, those beliefs would make us feel comfortable, but they are simply beliefs. We have to check whether they are providing us any real comfort or not, or we have simply supposed that there is comfort in our own beliefs. We have to check, we have to be rigorous, we have to doubt. In the worldly matters, we are so rigorous. We check everything. We make sure that it is fine. We make sure that things are perfect, that our house looks right, that the things we buy are of good quality, that nobody else is duping us, that nobody else is making a fool out of ourselves. We try to get the best deals. We try to make sure that everything that we purchase, that we possess, is of good quality and is not compromised. But when it comes to the matters, the inward matters, we are too eager to settle on conclusions. We are too eager to subscribe to the available influences in our environment. We simply allow beliefs to enter without checking, without questioning, without making sure that whether is it the real thing or it is a knockoff. Our rigor in the worldly matters has to travel within. If we don't like to be fooled when we buy things, when we purchase items, we shouldn't be fooling ourselves too. If we don't like to be fooled, if we don't like to be duped, if we want to have everything of the best quality outside, we should make sure that everything within is also of that excellent quality, that nothing within is substandard, that nothing within is a sham, that nothing within is false, is an illusion. If we don't like being lied to in our daily life by other people, we shouldn't be lying to ourselves too either. Our rigor, our fussiness, our insistence on making sure things are right when it comes to the outside matters, with our job, with our partner, with our house, with the things we buy, we should also make sure that everything is right within, that there is no false notion, that there is no stupid belief that we are carrying within just to make ourselves feel comfortable, just to have a sense of security within, albeit false. If we display patience, if we can wait for things to fall in place rightly in the outside matters, we should have the same patience within to find out what is it that is real, who really I am, the identities that I carry within, are they really mine? Am I an Indian? Am I a Japanese? Am I a man that my body claims me to be? Am I my profession? Am I my religious identity? Am I my cultural identity? We cannot let anything slide. We cannot simply rely upon any of these outside conditions, outside identities that promise to be our own identity, that make us believe it is them who we are, that we are the country that we are born in, that we are the religion that we are born in, that we are the gender that we are born with. One has to be ruthless in this inquiry of who am I. We cannot just simply settle upon easy conclusions, on what is readily available, on the definitions that somebody else has given to us. And if that keeps us insecure, that one should be living with that insecurity, because that insecurity is good, is healthy. It is way better than a false security, an illusion, a lie. Human nature is not what we see all around us. It is not that constant boredom, that dullness, that unending demand for pleasure, that hate, the animosity, the jealousy, the insecurity, the fearfulness. That is not human nature. That is simply our present condition. One can go beyond all of this. One can break out from this spell that is casted upon us. There is a possibility of discovering that which is really human, and that which is human totally without any influences conditioning the blemishes of its past, is sacred, is pristine. It is not a result of experiences, memory, or an influence. It is that which keeps the human being alive. Without that, the human being is simply his conditioning and nothing else.